We are on Daf Lamed Gimel 33a, and we've been discussing the story of Rabbi Hanina ben Doisa, who, according to the version in the Babylonian Talmud, he was advised. They told him that there's a very dangerous creature called an aroid, and they wanted him to somehow save the community. And Rabbi Hanina ben Doisa said, "Show me where it is, and show me where its hole is." And he put his foot over the hole of this creature called an aroid, and the aroid ended up biting him. And what happened next was the somehow nothing happened. He got bit, but that's all. The aroid ended up dying, and he seemed to be fine. And he brought this snake. I'm sorry, this aroid, similar to, I guess it's a combination of a snake and a toad. He brought this animal to the base medrash, and he put it on his shoulder, brought it to the base medrash, and he told them, "Look over here, my sons. It's not the aroid that kills, rather it's the sins that kill." And at that time, then they said, "Woe is to a person who encounters an aroid, and woe is to an aroid that is encountered by Rabbi Hanina ben Doisa." So that was the final story. And then we mentioned that there's the other version of this story is in the Jerusalem Talmud. And the Jerusalem Talmud mentions that Rabbi Hanina ben Doisa was not told about this. Let me mute everyone. So Rabbi Hanina ben Doisa was not told that there's an aroid in town. He happened to have been davening, and the aroid came and bit him, and he did not interrupt his prayer. And after, it seems like they found, in other words, I guess after he finished davening, they found near his seat, they found this aroid dead. And they said, "Woe is to a person that a aroid, that in the Jerusalem Talmud, it calls it a chabarbar." It's the same animal, this aroid. But woe is to a person that the chabarbar bites, and woe is to the chabarbar that bites Rabbi Hanina ben Doisa. So the Jerusalem Talmud, the way we have it, continues, and it says, what is the nature of this chabarbar? And it says that when it bites a person, if the person reaches water first, the chabarbar dies. And if the chabarbar reaches water first, the person dies. And the commentary over here mentions that this is a charm to save the life of the bitten person. So it's not, I guess, according to logic, it's some type of a segula, some type of a, Chinese medicine, like, some type of a miraculous type of thing. You somehow, if you have water, it somehow, if you reach the water first, it somehow it has some type of an effect, and some type of an alternative medicine, I guess. In any event, the students asked Rabbi, I'm just reading from this Jerusalem Talmud here. So the students asked Rabbi, they asked Rabbi Hanina ben Doisa, they said, "Master, teacher, Rebbe, did you not feel the bite?" In other words, didn't you feel, you didn't interrupt your prayer, the animal came and bit you, and you were in the middle of davening. Again, this is different than the Babylonian version. This is the Jerusalem Talmud version, where he didn't know there was a chabarbar around. He was in the middle of davening, and it went and bit him, and he did not stop. So they asked him, what do you mean? You didn't feel it? So he said may misfortune befall me if I felt the bite of a chabarba because I was concentrating on my prayer, meaning that, of course, I didn't feel any bite. I was standing before Hashem. I was davening. I was going to feel a bite. Keep in mind that this type of a bite is normally fatal. This is obviously a very strong bite, but Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa says, no way, how could I was in the middle of davening. So the Gemara explains how he was saved. And the Gemara says that Hashem created a well miraculously beneath the sole of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa's feet. And in order to fulfill the verse, Ritzoin Yereyav Yasa, the will of those who fear him, he will do, and their prayer he will hear, and he will save them. And so the point is that not only does Hashem listen to their prayers, but he will even save them from matters that they don't even know about. In other words, he was bit. He didn't even know that he was bitten. So what we see from this statement, the way the Jerusalem, the way it's brought here, is not that Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa entered himself into a sakana, into a danger, but instead he was in the middle of davening. He simply didn't know anything. He didn't know that he was bit, and therefore there's no question on how he was allowed to do this. Again, we spoke about according to the version in the Babylonian Talmud, how was he allowed to do this? He was entering himself into a place of sakana, danger. He heard that there's this aroid in town. He asked to be brought there. He put his foot on top of the hole that it normally lives in. This was a situation of entering yourself into a place of danger, which is normally not allowed under normal circumstances. And we came up with, and we found a few answers that, but obviously it's not the norm is you don't enter yourself into a place of danger. We did have a nice answer from the Baal Shem Tov that says that if you're not afraid of anything in the world, only Hashem, then you would be allowed to enter such a situation of danger. So that was a inspirational vart from the Baal Shem Tov. Now, the other thing that should be mentioned here is what's the conclusion with regard to a snake. So what comes out from the Gemara is that a snake is not considered dangerous, and therefore you continue davening. That's what it seems like from the Gemara, unless it's coming against you, unless you see it, But if it's just wrapped around your heel, it's not considered. The snake is not itself considered dangerous. That would be different if it was a scorpion, but a snake is not. If it bites you, are you in a place of danger? But the snake itself, or only if it's instigated to hurt you, is it considered dangerous? So the question is, there's a question on what is the Mishnah says that for a snake, you don't interrupt your prayer. And so what would you say the reason is? The snake is not really dangerous. So the Rambam, the way he writes it in his explanation to the Mishnah, is that the majority of snakes are not dangerous. Now, all the commentaries ask a question on the Rambam, on Maimonides. Just because majority of snakes are not dangerous, when it comes to life and death, we don't go after the majority. You can't just rely on majority. This is a life and death situation. Majority are not dangerous. I'm going to take it. Imagine if, the vaccine for COVID, imagine if 49 people died from the vaccine. So majority of people don't die from taking the vaccine. Vaccine is safe. If majority of people, 51 people live, 49 people died, but majority of people live. Would you go and take it? No way. You'd be crazy. It wouldn't be allowed to according to halacha. You don't rely on the majority when it comes to life and death. So here, we're talking about, a life and death situation, and majority of snakes are not dangerous. So this is what the commentaries, try to figure out how to explain, how to explain this statement of the Rambam on the Gemara. In other words, normally the way you would learn is the snakes are not dangerous unless they're aiming after you. If they're wrapped around you, it's not dangerous at all. But if you say it's majority are not dangerous, that's really taking a whole new path over here and saying that you're allowed to enter a place of danger, because majority of people don't die. So the one of the explanations, and this is quite revolutionary what he says, because he not everyone agrees with this, but he says, how is it that you're allowed to travel? In the olden days, you take a boat, travel far place. Many times boats sank in the olden days. Many times the storms in the ocean. Or what happens if you go through the forest? Many times people didn't make it out alive. It would take a long trip. How were people allowed to do that? So he says, the reason why you're allowed to do that is because at this moment, you're not in a place of danger. Even though, person has to be careful for their life. But when you leave, when you're on the ship, when you go off on the ship, it's not dangerous. Later on, if there's a storm, that's when it becomes dangerous. That's when you're in a moment of danger. And that would be something that you wouldn't be allowed to enter into, but you're there already, it's too late. But initially, because it's not happening right now, the danger is not imminent, is not right away. Therefore, it's not a problem of entering yourself, into a place of danger, even though majority of people live. That's not good enough. But the point is, since it's not immediate, you're not in a scenario of danger now. Therefore, it's not considered a problem. You would be allowed to travel. It's similar to the laws of a person donating their organs to help save another life. So in science, they try to convince everyone. Of course, people should donate. All these research people. That they want people to donate their brain and donate their organs to science. In this way, they'll be able to figure out, different things and maybe help save lives in the future. So the problem is, if you're saving a life right now, normally the body is meant to be buried after a person passes away. Now, the only exception would be, you're saving a life. To save a life and death, you can transgress the burial in order to save someone's life. However, that's if it's immediate. The person's situation of life and death right now, and they happen to need a brain, and your brain is available, and you would be able to save their life if they somehow do a brain transplant, which I don't think there is such a thing. I'm just giving an example. I don't believe there is such a thing. But theoretically, that would be the scenario where a person, according to halacha, would be, they would be obligated to save someone else's life. They're dead. They died. but they sign off on a paper before they die that this is, if it's going to save someone else's life. So instead of fulfilling the mitzvah of burial, they would save someone's life, which would override any other mitzvah in the Torah. They could donate their, they could theoretically, give their brain to save someone else's life. However, the problem is that that's not what happens. They want to take your brain and study it for 25 years. They're not saving someone's life now. They're going to study it for the next 25 years. And 25 years later, they might find out some little information about your brain and how, it could help them heal people in the future. Now, that's one area of transplant. There's another issue with donating organs, and that is that very often they take organs from people that are alive and they cause them to die. That's a different issue. Like, for example, they would love for people to donate their kidneys or their liver, and they do it after the person is brain dead. So according to American law, they're dead, and they say, now we'll take the kidney. But not necessarily is that dead according to Jewish law. And therefore, what do? They take someone's kidney, they go give someone, save someone else's life, but they're actually killing you by doing so, according to some opinions, because you're still alive, because your heart is still alive. And according to some opinions, that's considered life. And therefore, they cut off the doctors want to say you're dead anyway, so that they can take a person's kidney and give it to someone else. But that's another issue. I'm talking about the fact that it's not that if it's a scenario where you're not using it immediately to save someone's life, that is not called saving someone's life. So this rabbi, the Binyan Tzion, he's a great author of svarim of books on Gemara and on halacha. So he writes that here would be a scenario where this would be the explanation of the Rambam, that the person who if there is a snake, the majority of snakes do not bite. Once a snake bites, then it's a situation of a life and death situation, because some bites could be dangerous if you don't somehow take the right medicines or whatever. So, but before the snake bites, there is a majority. Just like you'd be allowed to travel, and you travel, no danger is happening immediately. The same thing would apply to a snake, and therefore it would be considered, you would be allowed to rely on the majority. That's the explanation that he gives. But other rabbis disagree with this. They say that the reason you're allowed to travel is not because the danger is not right now. The reason you're allowed to travel is because that's the common method of people do things. They travel, even though there is a danger, and there is a concept that something that's accepted to do, shomer pisoim Hashem guards you, and you are allowed to travel, even though travel in the olden days was considered dangerous. They were allowed to travel because, that was the norm of how they, were able to get around and do business, and they had to do things that carried with it certain amount of danger. That was the norm. That was expected. It wasn't like, you were entering yourself into it. You were doing something abnormal. No, that was the normal way people lived, and that was considered a acceptable thing. Therefore, according to halacha, it's also considered acceptable. And that's the answer to why travel was allowed. And according to that, you don't have an explanation for the Rambam. Yes, Ben.
I wanted to say there's also snakes that are not venomous.
Right.
So you don't know it's a venomous snake or not.
That is what the Rambam is saying, that some are deathly, some aren't. That's what the Rambam is saying, but we shouldn't follow that, because we don't care if it's majority are safe and only minority. It's a life and death situation. Logic tells us according to halacha, normally we don't do such things. We don't follow such. David, did you want to say something? Or?
Yeah, regarding organ transplants.
Yeah.
So in the United States, there's many, many thousands of people that are on a waiting list that as soon as somebody donates a kidney or is involved in a car accident, then they're going to die or they're dead already and the kidney's still fresh. So it's a question of immediacy that there is somebody waiting in the United States for kidney transplants. That's the number one. And also with liver, a person can safely donate. Not only can a healthy person can safely donate a kidney, but also a healthy person can safely donate a very small portion of their liver, which will stimulate the production of a full liver in a person who needs a liver transplant.
No, I'm aware of that. The point is, if a person's alive and donates their kidney, that's great. They're saving someone's life. That's amazing. It's a huge mitzvah, or half of their liver. But if they're brain dead and the the doctors decide they're going to harvest this person's kidney because they're brain dead already, and they end up causing the heart to stop working because they remove these vital organs and do these serious surgical procedures. So they're actually causing the person to die, according to some opinions, and that is where it's an issue. That's not really the reason I brought it up. Was mainly to mention the fact that we don't normally look at life and death if it's something that it might lead to saving someone in the long-term future. That was my main point, and that was the source of this rabbi who wants to explain the Rambam this way. Phyllis, did you also want to say something about organ?
I just want to say with an organ donation, if a person is dead and the person's dying and the death will be accelerated by the organ donation, that's obviously the problem.
A problem, right?
But many of the organ donations take place from people that are living, they're in good health, and they ask their doctors, and their doctors say, yeah, you can donate your kidney safely and while you're alive. And that's the best kind of kidneys to donate for people that need a kidney, is something that's fresh and alive.
Right, for sure. Yes, Phyllis, yeah.
I myself know of a dentist whose life was saved by one of his own twin daughters donating a kidney. However, there was a great liver transplant specialist in communist China who, when he found out that a device had been invented specifically for the purpose of causing brain death, although not complete death, but brain death, just in order so that the government could be facilitated in continuing with more and more transplants. He killed himself in order to not be
interesting, Phyllis. But I don't want to get sidetracked from our learning Torah here. But that is interesting conspiracy information for those of us that like conspiracy theories. That's definitely interesting. It might be true. I'm not disagreeing. It sounds interesting. Okay, we're going to continue. So we have the Mishnah on page 33a. Mazkirin Gvuras Geshamim. We mention the strength of rain as a praise for Hashem. In which bracha? B'tchias hamesim, in the blessing of tchias hamesim. Again, we're talking about additions that are added into the Shemona Esrei. So one of them is thanking Hashem for the rain. Now we don't mention the rain all year round, because in Israel it's actually not good if it rains in the summer. So when do we mention the rain? We mention the rain from the last day of Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, I should say, from Shmini Atzeres until the first day of Pesach. That's when it's a blessing if it rains. So we mention and thank Hashem for the rain. We say Mashiv Haruach Amar Geshem. Now, that blessing is in Tchias HaMesim, and the blessing for giving life to the dead, resurrecting the dead. Ushe'ela, we ask for rain, and that is a request for rain, which is in the blessing. The Gemara says, the Mishnah says, "B'berchas Hashanim," in the blessing of Mevarech Hashanim, Baruch Aleinu. Now the request for rain here outside of Israel, we actually request for rain around December 4th, or if it's a leap year, December 5th. And then we don't ask for rain anymore after, also Pesach is the first day of Pesach is when we stop asking for rain. And that is in the middle blessings of the Shemona Esrei, which are blessings of requests. The Havdalah, B'chein and Hadas, in Havdalah, we recite Havdalah after Shabbos and Yantiv. We recite it in the blessing of Chein and Hadas, who gives us knowledge. This is the first opinion. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Omer Beracha Revias, B'fnei Atzma, person says this Havdalah, this addition, as a bracha on its own. And when is it, where is it inserted? It's inserted right after the Hakel HaKadosh, after you praise Hashem, being the holy God, and before the blessing of Atochainin, who gives us knowledge. So Rabbi Akiva says it has to be a blessing of its own, and it's not just included in one of the other blessings, like the first opinion. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer says, you include it in one of the other blessings, but it's bihoida'a, in the end of the Shemona Esrei, when we give thanks to Hashem. And that is the Mishnah. The Gemara says, Mazkirin Gvuras Geshamim, we mentioned the strength of rain in Tchias HaMesim. The Gemara asks, my taima, what is the reason that they established that blessing in the bracha of Mechaya Mesim, that Hashem gives life? Why do we mention there about the rain? In other words, we understand it doesn't belong in the middle area of the Shemona Esrei, because the middle section of the Shemona Esrei is all about request. This is not a request. This is a mention of thanks. It's a praise to Hashem. But still, why should it be in the blessing of Mechaya Mesim, who resurrects the dead? So the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Mitoich sheshkula ketchias hamesim, since rain is equal to giving life, to resurrecting the dead, because the rain gives life and it causes the grain to grow. So therefore, it is included kavua b'tchias hamesim. They established it to be recited in the blessing of tchias hamesim, the blessing of giving life. Now the Gemara says, U'she'elo beberachas hashanim, and we ask for rain in the blessing of Baruch Aleinu, the blessing that we ask Hashem for good produce and all that. My taima, why do we include the request for rain in that blessing to bless our years? Amar Rabbi Yosef says, Mitoich shehi parnasa, since it is sustenance, the rain brings sustenance, it gives support. Lefikach kava'uha, therefore they established it beberachas parnasa, in the blessing of parnasa, that the person's sustenance should be blessed. That would be very similar to asking Hashem for rain. Then the Gemara says, Havdalah b'chein and hadas, that we include the statement of Havdalah in the blessing of chein and hadas. Now this is an interesting one, because if you go through the Havdalah paragraph, you have to figure out what exactly, is this a request or is this a praise? What is the Havdalah? So Amar Rabbi Yosef says, Mitoich shehi chachma. Rabbi Yosef says, Havdalah is really chachma, it's wisdom. In other words, you need to know, to be able to differentiate between the holy and the non-holy, the mundane, or to be able to differentiate between pure and impure. So therefore, they've established it, beberchas chachma, in the blessing of atochenim. Rabbanan Amri, the rabbis say a different reason. Mitoich shehi choil, since it is the mundane, it talks about mundane activities, because we're separating between the Shabbos now and the weekday. Lefikach kva'uha beberchas choil, they established it in the blessing of a weekday, meaning we're not talking about the wisdom element of it. We're talking about the fact that it has to do with mundane activities. So there, because you're now going to be allowed to perform work because it's Saturday night, or it's after Yontif, you're now allowed to do work. So where does this blessing, the statement of Havdalah, where does it belong? It belongs in the first blessing of weekday, the first mundane blessing. In other words, on Shabbos, we recite the first three blessings of the Shemona Esrei in the last three blessings. So the place where we change from Shabbos to weekday is the middle 13 blessings. The first one is the blessing of Atochoni. That's the blessing where we should say the Havdalah, because this Havdalah is about entering into the weekday, and the blessing that enters us into the weekday is the Atochonin blessing. The Gemara says then further, Amar Reb Ami says, G'dayla Deya Shenitna Betchilas Bracha Shel Choil. Great is Deya, is wisdom, that it is mentioned as the first blessing. Somehow the fact that it's considered the first blessing of the middle blessings, so the first blessing of the weekday, they established it as the first. Why is it established as the first? It means it has some type of a greatness. It's some type of a uniqueness, that it's considered that it's going to be placed there. It's more distinguished. It's more significant as being put there as the first. And the idea is that it's giving us the knowledge of who Hashem is, that we're able to then ask all the other requests on top of that blessing. So we're going to stop here. I know my time is up.